So we're going to start things off from Mr. Tycho Tweets. Now, Tycho's been around probably since the very, very, very beginning of Jasmy. Been covering it longer than I have. I believe he might even be an ambassador. I always kind of wondered about that. Anyway, always does a really good job of sharing some detailed information. This is what he has. I want you guys to pay attention to some of the stuff because it is reported from Coinbase. And just like you see in regards to the title of this show, Jasmy is outperforming the market. And again, when we talk about citing things, well, what's this actually originally cited from? Statistics from Coinbase. Whether we like Coinbase or not, it is worth pointing out. So let's get into the nitty gritty. So what you see right here, why is Jasmy outperforming the market? Well, basically speaking, according to Tycho Tweets, the leading Japanese cryptocurrency, Jasmy is the benefactor of multi-pro crypto amendments in Japan, for instance. Now, I touch bases on some of these things, and I'm also going to share with you guys some key things that I've also found other than what you see on the surface from in regards to the statistics from X and Coinbase and all that stuff. So this part real quick, let's go ahead and actually make this even that much more bigger. Let me come out of the frame. And so look at this for a second, guys. Okay. So like it mentions, popularity 92, typical hold time 42 days, benchmarks performance past year up 100. Let's round it off 165%. What about like versus BTC? Because we always point out that Jasmy runs in correlation with BTC and Ethereum. Those represent still about 80 to 81% of the overall crypto market. But have you guys noticed that Jasmy is now doing its own thing, even when those two are down? I mean, that's something to be said. How about ETH the past year? Plus 46%. Wow, versus the market, 47%. Very, very interesting. I'm glad that Tycho shared this with us, right? And come back in the frame. And getting more into this, there's a lot more to it. So this is straight from Medyo or meti.go.jp. If you're wondering where the source is, this is interpreted from Japanese into English. There is some parts that kind of get lost in translation. You guys know how it goes. But basically speaking, from the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, the Cabinet approved the bill to partially amend the Industrial Competitiveness Enhancement Act, etc., to promote the creation of new businesses and investment in industry. There was another update that was, of course, after that. And a lot of you guys, whether it's Le Grand Commission, a few of you other guys, I think even Simon Greco, I don't know if these two are here tonight, retweeted it, pointed out. And I thought that was, a big deal, right? Because right after the news broke about these becoming, actual laws, going from bill to, I guess you could say, an act, and basically lighten a match to the whole thing of these startups, especially, like ones like Jasmy back in 2016 and then came into the a listing in 2021. That ended up being a big deal because obviously Jasmy is the first to be regulatory compliant in Japan, in the country that's more strict than what we have here. But getting into some of this stuff, talks about the purpose of the bill, the summary of the bill, and I've talked about a few of these key things, but I want to point out this particular one, okay? And that basically is this right here, where it talks about this partial revision of the law regarding investment limited partnership contracts. And the whole thing about the purpose of independent administration, institutional industrial property information and training center. What's kind of crazy about it is it's like, on the surface, it might seem complicated, but it really isn't. But technology, like it says, partial revision of the National Research and Development Agency New Energy Industrial Technology Development Organizational Act. How many times did you see Jasmy over the course of, maybe not even with me, covering it for over a year, but like since the beginning, or even in the white paper, the reference to, Industry 4.0, right? The fourth industrial revolution, basically, not Industry 4.0. But that was a big deal. And when you see also like in some of the commercial advertisements, they use that reference even in Japanese. So it's nice to see this reference here. And basically speaking, before we get into this next part, I said to myself, this whole thing about the cabinet of ministry and economy and trade and this whole thing with Japan, obviously, you know, what is the real significance of it all? And especially when it comes to like, let's face it, Jasmy moving forward. I mean, if anything, that's why you're here tonight. Well, basically speaking, there were specific provisions of the bill. And while the title mentions promoting like new businesses and investments, the bill will in fact determine how things will shape, whether it's Jasmy or a few other ones connected to IoT. I mean, I'd give a shout out to IoTex, right? Even them. But when we talk about Japan specifically, you have to keep in mind that there is, in my opinion, a significant um, amount of what can come into fruition from here. So, for one, I think this whole thing in itself, in regards to what I gathered, will very well demonstrate Japan's commitment to promoting growth of new businesses and investment in the industry. I mean, how many times do we talk about small to medium enterprises, right? SMEs. I cover that a lot in regards to quant. But this bill itself, right, did aim to enhance industrial competitiveness by providing support and, of course, various different incentives for the creation of just that new businesses. This is why a lot of times I go back to the past. You guys have seen this in regards to Shinzo Abe, right? He laid the framework, if you really think about it, where you see all this stuff going on in Japan. Since 2015, he talked about this. So these incentives for the creation of new businesses, whether they're small, medium enterprises, and so on, but especially, these startups, as the saying goes, right? Jasmy used to be a startup, especially back in 2016. If anything, they took advantage of, these things that Shinzo Abe introduced. So, in my opinion, this does have a very a very huge positive impact on Jasmy because you've seen immediately, we talk about like a flip of a switch, things got put into motion and then things end up being passed. And as a result, supply and demand kicks in. I pointed this out a long time ago. I'm not the only one, right? A lot of members of the community, Jesse, KIR Finance, Rob, for instance, Crypto Future, many other YouTubers, researchers, what do you want to call it? But, a lot of us pointed out, whether it's a YouTuber or whatever, that watch out for Jasmy because they have already built this foundation, especially during a crypto winter. And a lot of people who just don't understand this whole concept of crypto because they look at it like it is a fairly new thing. In regards to altcoins, the smart contracts, right? I'm not talking about like Bitcoin, but they looked at like I don't see much price action. And how many times, whether it's myself or other people, point out, look, if you understand utility in motion, you can't just have a partnership overnight and then nothing there and then expect, the utility to pump. I mean, think about it. Utility is just that, utilizing something that's going to benefit not just your organization, but others and people that are connected to it and so on. So XDC was another great example of that, especially in crypto winter. Now, while XDC may not be doing as much as Jasmy recently, you have to recognize and appreciate where this is all came from, right? Laying down a core solid foundation. So we see what's going on with this. We see the incentives and how it benefits not just Jasmy, but especially like the Japanese government to incentivize all this. And there's support and incentives, like we mentioned, right? That was provided by amending this particular act. More specifically, I want to get into three key things that I noticed, and maybe you want to take note of it yourself if you choose to do so. This act streamlines the process of establishing new businesses, but especially makes it easier for entrepreneurs to launch their ventures. It's not just like Jasmy emerging from this. They already have. How cool is that? But it offers financial incentives and even tax breaks that we did reference last year. If anybody remember me talking about that, as well as other researchers from our community. But yes, incentives for tax breaks for companies investing in research and development. Research and development. How many times do we see those references? Even me joking around with you guys with what? A race crop consortium, right? Like, how many times have you heard me say that? But it's the expansion of operations. It's to provide support for companies looking to enter what? International markets. Say what you want. Last year, what did we cover that was a big deal? IVS Crypto 2023. And not only that, but other events that Jasmy showed up by extending their hand, extending their arm, going to other places, right? And branching out outside of Japan. That was a perfect example of that expansion of their operations. Even here, right? Confirming, hey, Jasmy does have an office in regards to Silicon Valley and preparing for the future with that. Because they're going to take it to the next level when it comes to the Jasmy Secure PC and the whole thing of the software, Avita, for instance, right? They got a lot of things in place. That's extending their reach. That's extending their expansion of operations. So this third thing, in regards to providing support for companies looking to enter international markets, this bill, or which I should say is an amended act, I should say, does include the whole thing of like providing assistance with export promotion and market access. Now back to the topic of Jasmy real quick. For Jasmy and all of us, there's we're mainly concerned about Jasmy, let's just be honest. This means that the company may have an easier time setting up new businesses, as in Jasmy, accessing financial incentives, and expanding its operations both domestically, not just for Japan, but internationally. And that is what I find so appealing. So when you saw that, if you attended the AMA or even listened to the recorded or whatever the case be, saw a review, whether it's for me or whoever, talked about hitting 107 million users and it would be very easily done. Well, I think so. And I think, if anything, they'll supersede that big time. I see, for instance, at least a 500 million. That's just, my particular prediction. It's not a price prediction, but it's a prediction based off of what they have already done. And when you look up the whole thing of the conglomerate of everything connected to it, I think that can be more than achievable too. But this whole thing of what they're going to do in Japan domestically and also internationally, I do think is a huge deal. But in itself, it's going to lead to increased growth, competitiveness, which you do need to see them still compete, and overall success for Jasmy in the long run. Don't get it twisted. Just because you see Jasmy only doing this once, I don't think that this is where it stops. There's going to be times in which you're going to see pullback and so on, and that is to be expected, right? It's not just something that goes parabolic nonstop forever. I mean, nothing does that, right? So the next thing I want to get into, basically speaking, is, there's this whole thing about paying attention to specifically this right here. And that is, some people have pointed out, you know, what in the world is DFW Labs doing? And this particular gentleman points it out, and we'll get in that in a bit. But basically, it's from Dip Metaverse. Now, Dip, you guys know Dip for the most part, right? I mean, he went all the way over to Japan. He met Hara. I don't even know. I think he met some of the other guys too, right? He mentioned some reports that we were wondering about, like apparently, I don't know if it was him that mentioned it, but somebody else mentioned that, Kunitake Ando actually shows up to the Jasmy office once a week. How cool is that? So he still, still stays informed and so on. But in regards to the big money, let's talk about this for just a brief moment. Jasmy, right? DFW Labs, which we know is connected with Jasmy, moved 299 million tokens into Binance, in regards to Binance 14, over the past several hours. Now, this was shown yesterday around 2:30 Mountain Time. And I didn't do a show with you guys yesterday, but the point is still referencing it, still valid because a lot of people wondering like what the heck is going on, especially when it comes to Jasmy. And he mentioned a Binance, people want to pay attention to it. I will state this, and we'll get more into this a little bit later after we take a break because we're not going to make this 3 hours long. But there's this whole thing of like think about Jasmy in regards to being placed in the zone that they were put into, right? And then basically speaking, Jasmy was at 0.008 before Binance US put Jasmy into the innovation zone. And then they called it something else, right? Gave that monitoring tag. But the bottom line was 0.008 first quarter of 2023. It was either February, March. I can't remember the exact time frame. I just know it was first quarter. And price tanked, something fierce. Caused a lot of FUD, a lot of fear. A lot of people got out of Jasmy. People sold for a loss. Whatever the case be. Right? I didn't do that. If anything, I bought more. Okay. As the saying goes, when there's a lot of fear, buy more, especially if you've done the right research. Right? That's not me bragging. That's just the way it is. So the fact of the matter still remains that happened. And yet Jasmy is still in this quote unquote monitoring zone. But when you see things like this, it's kind of like you put two and two together and it makes you think, well, is Binance preparing to move them out? Say what you want, worth paying attention to. Thanks again to Dip. Let's come out of the frame for a second so you can see it a little bit better. But I think it's a big deal. And basically speaking, I mean, you see here that, the addresses show up from DWF Labs. I keep calling it DFW. Probably because of Dallas Fort Worth, right? Shout out to Mike Cornwell, Edward Vincent in that regard. They know what I'm talking about. But anyway, DWF Labs. And you can see that's, this whole thing of like In-N-Out Burger for crying out loud. But, DWF and, of course, Binance. So it's interesting. And I'm glad DIP has this type of info. Getting further into this, I decided to get more into some of this info. And here it is on your screen. So there was a recent report, and I didn't see a lot of people talking about this, right? And this actually just came out today, so it's okay, right? Thought I'd get out ahead of it for you guys. So as we know, today's the 22nd. If you're watching it recorded, you may see it today, you may see it tomorrow, but it's not like it's time sensitive to a degree. The point is that DWF Labs, like it says, pumps millions of Jasmy and FET tokens into this major exchange. But what's the real reason, right? Some people say like, oh, well, this is payback, and payback's you know what, right? I don't know about that, but I will show you guys some more information and you can draw your own conclusion. Like I've always mentioned, never financial advice, just bring you guys information, right? Research and so on. But I do think this is somewhat of a big deal. And basically speaking, we have done the deep dives in regards to DWF, I think more than 2 or 3 times, right? But your key takeaway should be that, like it says, they are a cryptocurrency investment firm, right? They have recently transferred significant amounts of not only Jasmy, but this whole thing of FET tokens, okay? And this is, of course, from data that was, shown here in reference to spot on chain. Well, mentions all this. It's not just DIP paying attention to this. It's also recognizing that they are also doing this with other particular tokens. I think that's worth pointing out as well. Going further down into this, you will see some things that just kind of make you scratch your head a little bit. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole thing about FET tokens so much. I will drop it down to the whole thing of Jasmy. There's a massive amount of Jasmy tokens also on the move, like we mentioned. And of course, DIP pointed this out. So the below graph only includes the transactions in and out of centralized exchange or the token swap specifically. As you see on the screen, it does reference Jasmy. I'll come out of the frame once again. I want to put some emphasis on this instead of my mug. So what you see here is all these particular different amounts, 30 million, 200 million, 99 million, and different points, 100 million, and this big one that Dip pointed out for roughly, 700 million, just slightly below it, right? So that purchase for 700 million comes out to be 3.088 million in American dollars. You do see, some of these sells. It's like, well, what are they doing? Is there anything else to be mentioned? Well, there's a node list, right, of the outflows, but the unrealized gain was roughly 3.112 million, which is obviously a 260% increase. The realized gain before that was 3.347 million, right? It is a big deal. But along with that, DWF Labs also deposited 1 million Jasmy tokens worth 954,000 to Binance. DWF Labs currently holds 3.05 million Jasmy tokens valued at 3.27 million, and that does represent 4.55 million in total profits. The movement, like it says, coincided with two whales. Yes, two whales. We're always tracking whale activity. And transferred 6.66, excuse me, I got that wrong. 665.655 million tokens worth 5.36 million from Coinbase. Jasmy has also seen substantial gains lately. Duh, we know that. With actually this number is way higher. I saw it like over 200%. Surges last week. The rises are linked to the growing interest from Japanese investors. So bottom line is this, all right? There's a few reasons for this, and I know I'm not in a frame, but it doesn't matter. Are they taking profits? Are they rebalancing their portfolio? Are they providing liquidity? Well, this part I think we should pay attention to the most. Providing liquidity. DWF may be supplying tokens to exchanges to boost liquidity for trading. Now you got to keep in mind, is this utility for trading in regards to, like I mentioned before, utility in motion, or is it to get things ready for this next step of, the AI blockchain, the layer 2 solution? I mean, it's kind of mixed on that. Nobody really knows, but it's worth pointing out. This other part about, for instance, the motivations, right? It's all speculative. But again, people in the community, whether it's myself, Dip Metaverse, and so on, are all paying attention to this. So let me come back into the frame. It's basically this. Actually, before I come back in the frame, Dip posted this as well, and that is this. There's a poll question, and it does end basically in a day. And I just decided not to vote on it because I don't want my influence to, make you vote on something you don't want to vote on. I mean, at the end of the day, you vote the way you want if you choose to be part of this poll. It says from Dip Metaverse, Jasmy community, I have another poll question, like it mentions. When do you think Binance will remove the monitoring tag, formerly known as Innovation Zone? Great question. Just an FYI, Binance reviews projects listed with the monitor tag every January, April, July, and October. Interesting. He says, thank you for the 1,500 plus people who voted on the first poll. He hopes we can get similar numbers this time around. But what do you guys think? Is it going to be April? Will it be July, October, and beyond? I'm not going to tell you what I think it is right now. Again, I want you guys to, choose which one you want. So with that said, that's going to, for the most part, before we wrap it up, actually, I'm going to show you one more thing. Sorry. I was going to say that it's going to wrap it up. But look at this real quick. This is actually from CoinGecko. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you guys is just that. 30-day chart, it's actually 220% up for Jasmy. That is huge. So what's going on from the outside? Well, it's hard to say, but it's definitely all worth pointing out.